Hey everyone, welcome back to the Movie Memories series. This is a series that I haven't tackled in a little bit. So what I decided to do was break this into 3 parts. So I'm talking about from 1992 to 1999-2000. That'll be my first part where I'll be talking about my childhood memories. This is going to be the first episode we're doing right now, and actually it's going to be the hardest because I have to recount that far back, my memories all the way back there. The second part of this series will be focusing on from 2000 until 2010, so it'll have a 10-year span. And then the last episode of the Movie Memory series will be from 2010 and all the way up to 2019. So I want to do this all before I go, and that way you get a little bit of an idea what I'm going to be doing here. So I'll be recounting my memories, what I have associated with the films that I watched. And so if you're new to this, this is a really fun series I get to do where I really get to just select 5 films that I think really conjured up some memories of mine, either of, nostalgia, fear, laughter, good times, bad times, all of that in between. So let's just get started to a film that I recall back all the way when I was around 3 to 5 years old. And so this one is an old one too, much older than myself. And what film could that be? So that first film is actually Fantasia. So this movie came out in 1940, and obviously I was, 52 years afterwards I was born, and then so after that I was around, like I said, 3 to 5 years old. I remember watching this in my very, very first house that I lived in with my mom and dad back in Springfield, and we had a very narrow house, and I just recall a conjuring, honestly, if you will, of that night on Bald Mountain with the demon. Good God, that memory is seared into my mind. I had nightmares. I had such a good time with every single thing beforehand, with all the dancing animals and Mickey with the Sorcerer's Apprentice and just all these really fun things that I recall. But then comes the last act of this film, and boy oh boy was it a very frightening experience for me as a kid. And I just recall having nightmares of me, being in this village, and then all these specters and demons would be coming, conjuring up at night because of the music and, Bald Mountain, the demon lord. And the crazy thing you remember is Chernabog, which is one of the greatest Disney villains, probably most evil Disney villains you'll ever see that Disney ever conjure. And that's the reason I've used the word conjure a couple times, because it's a freaking demon. So I just recall all of these terrifying, terrifying moments, and the music by Schubert and the other guy who I'm going to be putting down here, I can't remember the other person's name, just really highlighted the visual poetry, also the visual horror that I got as a freaking kid. And I just remember, going in my very narrow hallway and just being terrified of this particular scene. So this is one of my earliest memories from my childhood. It was Fantasia, and it was a kind of a terrifying one, but there were some really good moments of Fantasia too that I remember, and most of my Disney associations are pretty good. So we're going to move on from this to my next movie memory. Alright, so moving on from Fantasia was another film that kind of scared me because I watched it with my cousins, and that is The Goonies from 1985. I actually watched this, this came out in 1985, so I was, not born yet, once again, but I remember watching this around 5 to 7 years old. So it was around 1997 or 1998 or 99 when I watched this film, and I remember going up to my cousin's house in Kansas City, and I used to, spend the night over. We used to go to, Chuck E. Cheese and have, pizza parties and, go to the pool, the giant pool. And honestly, it's actually just making me think of another film, The Sandlot, where they're all, I could have picked The Sandlot here, honestly, because we watched that too. But The Goonies is something I recall very vividly, because one night I remember watching this movie. We actually watched it several times, but and once again, just like I'm going to get with Fantasia, I was terrified of a particular moment. And I think the memory that really sticks with me is seeing Sloth, and honestly, hearing Sloth before you even see Sloth was probably the more scary thing. And the crazy thing is, even more terrifying than Sloth is the Fratelli family, and I remember them being just as goony as, you could get. These people were goons, and they were villains, and they hated children, and they really wanted to get them and, feed them to Sloth, and, I just really recall being scared of the sound of sloth, and also just recall my cousins and my cousins are younger than me, and so they were even younger, and so they would hide behind me, and I would subsequently like hide myself. And so it was just, we watched it several times though. Obviously it, you know, dissipated eventually, but The Goonies is my second film that I have a good memory from my childhood. Not so good memory, I suppose, but we're gonna go to a much nicer memory after this one. So along with my pizza parties at Chuck E. Cheese, I also, when I was younger, used to watch Home Alone. And I've seen Home Alone probably more than any other film. Either this or Monsters, Inc. or Incredibles, and I'll get to that eventually. So I used to go to a summer camp where my parents would put me and my sister, as they were working during the day, and so they were really, really busy, but we also went to field trips all the time. So we went like go-kart racing, we went to the lake, we went to the showboat Branson Belle, which is in Branson, pretty close to where I'm at. But we also went to Godfather's Pizza, and Godfather's Pizza always had their own little side room where they would play a movie. And the movie that they would always frickin' play was Home Alone. And we went to Godfather's at least 4 or 5 times every summer. And so we watched Home Alone quite a bit. And this is just something that has just been embedded into my memory. Also, you know, the idea of cheese pizza. I mean, this is pretty iconic with Home Alone. Macaulay Culkin really wants cheese pizza when he gets it from his parents at the very beginning of the film. And so it's just really, really great memory that I have associated with a summertime that I always grew up with. And I always had a lot of really good friends, and I've watched Home Alone just countless amount of times. And also just, it was just a good time to be a kid, honestly. I associated this with the Goonies once again. You know, I said there's that pizza connection, which is weird. I could probably insert the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles into this too. I probably snuck in. But pizza's great, right? That's what this is all about, right? Now we're actually going to move on from there to the late 90s. This movie is a Disney film, and I recall this once again seeing this film with my cousins. That film is Tarzan. Now, Tarzan has such a memorable score, and that's the thing that like stuck with me. And this is the first time I really fell in love with music, I think, was listening to Phil Collins' score on Tarzan. And I just recall really enjoying, and the moment I listened to it in theaters, and I just recall going to McDonald's afterwards with my cousins, going and getting a Happy Meal, getting a Tarzan toy with it. And this is when Happy Meals were huge, you know. The Happy Meals are subsequently much smaller now. My mom got a Happy Meal about 3 or 4 years ago, and I recall getting the fries, and it was literally kind of the palm of the size of my hand. That's how big the fries are, which is really insane. But I digress. I recall, honestly, this is the epitome of all the Disney films that I watched in the 90s. So Mulan, Hercules, all of these films that I have associated memories with, but Tarzan is the one that takes the cake because it has that musical association with it. And also I just remember with my uncle Joel, we would just go through that McDonald's drive-through line and get those, you know, those toys. And so McDonald's toys were a big part of my childhood. But with McDonald's, I think they had, you know, the renaissance of Disney, plus McDonald's had all those toys, and so it was just a really good association. And what a great way to really get introduced to music and listening to Phil Collins' score on Tarzan. I love this film. And the last thing I'll do is actually kind of a transition. And this transition kind of went from my childhood into my young adulthood in the 2000s. And so this movie came out in 1995, and I actually remember getting my Nintendo 64 very shortly after this movie, but I actually played the game before I watched the movie, and that is in this giant box right here, the Bond 50th anniversary right here. What movie am I talking about? I'm talking about Goldeneye. That came out in 95 with Pierce Brosnan, and that movie has one of the best games of all time. And that, I think I got that game back in 99 or 2000, really, really early. I got that early on, and it was my favorite game that I played. I played it constantly with my friends. Odd Job, Jaws. These are people who are not in the Goldeneye film, but the reason I bring up the Goldeneye film is I watched it after getting the game, and I just loved it. And I fell in love with James Bond, and I've actually seen all of these films pretty much around 1999, 2001. I watched all of them, except for maybe the Daniel Craig stuff and the later Pierce Brosnan as they came out afterwards. But I just remember watching all of these movies with my dad. We watched Goldfinger, we watched Dr. No, we watched Live and Let Die, the Roger Moore stuff. All these things flood to my memory, but Goldeneye was the one that started it all, and it was all because of the video game, the Nintendo 64, and that association I saw it, you know, like about 4 years after its release. So these have been my favorite movie memories from my childhood. These are just 4 movies that have stuck with me, where I may have been terrified with, you know, Fantasia and the Goonies. I've really dreamt of pizza with Home Alone and the Goonies. I've really accompanied with scores and music that is accompanied with Tarzan and even Fantasia, and also this memory with James Bond. And it's just stuck with me and in my childhood, and all these movies are still in my collection today, and honestly I got them way later obviously, but I love these movies. So thank you so much for checking out part 1 of the Movie Memories series, where I'm going to tackle from 1992 to 1999, and so I'll be tackling 2000 all the way to 2010 in my next episode. So thank you so much for checking this video out. Give me a like, comment down below, what are some movies that you have from your first like decade of your memories that you have? Do you have any associations with them? Share those stories down below. I'd love to hear them. So anyway, thank you so much for checking this video out. I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.